ay napaka-importanting bahagi ng ating roles and responsibility bilang isang psychologist at ganoon din bilang isang researcher. Kung walang pagtatanong, hindi natin ma-measure, hindi natin ma-validate, hindi natin ma-evaluate ang ating ginagawa bilang isang psychologist at gayon din bilang isang researcher. Hindi tayo makakapunta sa gusto nating pag-aralan kung hindi tayo magsisimula sa tanong, bakit ganito? Paano nangyayari yung ano ang relasyon ng bawat elemento na ito. Those are example of some questions that will lead us to become more critical and become more creative in the way we think. So sa makatawid sa ating pagsasaliksik, sa ating pag-research, at sa ating pag-practice bilang psychologists, mahalaga na maging bahagi ng ating sistema, ng ating proseso, ng ating galaw, ang pagtatanong. Dahil ang pagtatanong ang huhubog ng ating galing bilang isang psychologist at bilang isang researcher. Ngayon ay sisimulan nating sagutin ang napakaraming yung tanong tungkol sa Module 1. Okay? First, the constructivists and postmodern are both somehow acknowledging the diversity of the people. Hence, what is the big difference between the two? The difference that, to be more simple, postmodern is quite rigid in terms of understanding truth. May ba laging sinasabi that truth is relative. Ang totoo sa akin ay hindi totoo sa iyo. Ang totoo sa iyo ay hindi totoo sa akin. So when you are doing a research, hindi ibig sabihin na yun yung nakita mo, yun na yun. So marami kang pwedeng tingnan para busisiin ng gusto kung ano yung totoo doon sa isang research na yun. And very importantly, yung nakita kong datos doon ay hindi totoo sa isang lugar na maaring pareho din ang tao. Because again, truth is relative. Whereas in the constructivists, kinikilala nito ang iba't ibang, although may diversity, kinikilala nito ang iba't ibang pag-construct ng katotohanan. Okay? Na maaring ang pag-construct na ito ay maaaring mag-contribute din sa pananaw ng tao. Pananaw sa karasan o pananaw sa sarili. Okay. So again, to make it brief, mas rigid lang ang pagtingin ng postmodern sa katotohanan compared sa constructivists. How can we avoid being biased by a personal set of values when it comes to the interpretation of the results of our study in our chosen topic of interest? So whether we like it or not, we bring with us our memories, we bring with us our values dito sa ating utak, sa ating isipan. We cannot just get rid of that. So what is important is aware tayo na nangyayari yun. So later on, when we discuss about reflexivity, when we discuss about interpretation of data, pag-uusapan natin ulit ito. Okay? So you remind me again about this question when we talk about the interpretation of data in qualitative research. Would you say that quantitative research is easier than qualitative research? So we just have to remember this. If you really understand the nature of quantitative research and qualitative research, and you really understand the goals, the motivations, the disposition while we are doing research, hindi na siya kinakailangan itanong kasi yung ating goals, yung ating basic perspective sa paggawa ng research, yun yung maglilid sa atin. So it's no longer a question whether it is which one is easier. Okay? Dahil gagamitin natin anong research natin depende sa goals na gusto natin o sa goals na gusto nating iset, okay, sa paggawa ng research. Okay? Ang quantitative has by nature its own strength and its own weakness. Similarly, when we talk about qualitative, by nature, it has its own strength and it has its own weaknesses. At the end of everything boils down to what kind of research we want to push through. Okay, so it could be quantitative or it could be qualitative. Okay. So what are the difference between the terms philosophical framework, theoretical framework, and conceptual framework? Pag sinabi nating philosophical framework, ito na yung pinag-uusapan natin na na perspektibo sa pagtingin sa karanasan, sa realidad, o even sa datos natin sa pagharap sa mga iba't ibang karanasan. Meron tayong tinatawag na post-positivist, constructivist, or postmodern, at marami pang iba. So, ito yung ating mga lens na ginagamit para mas maintindihan natin ang iba-ibang proseso na nangyayari sa ating paligid. Okay? Ang theoretical framework naman, ito yung, kaya theoretical, it's coming from the word theory. So kapag, for example, gusto natin pag-aralan ang karanasan ng isang bata, ang kanyang pagtingin, for example, ang kanyang worldview, just for example, sa pandemya. Okay? Anong klaseng teorya ang gagamitin natin? So natin siya parang ikakahon para pag nakita natin yung datos, maintindihan natin related dito sa proseso nito, sa proseso nito. For example, we're going to make use of the learning theory of Piaget. Okay? So, gagamitin natin ngayon si John Piaget bilang ang kanyang teorya, bilang isang perspektibo sa pagtingin sa karanasan ng mga bata, sa pagtingin ng mga bata, ang kanyang worldview tungkol sa pandemya. Okay? At ang panghuli naman ay yung conceptual framework. Pag sinabi mo naman conceptual framework, tinitingnan mo ang pagkakaugnay-ugnay ng iba't ibang klaseng konsepto, iba't ibang klaseng variables, at gusto mo makita ang relasyon ng bawat isa. So bumubuo ka ng isang conceptual framework para ito ang magiging navigator mo sa paggamit ng iba't ibang konsepto at ang direksyon na ibibigay mo upang makita ang kanilang ugnayan, ang kanilang interaction sa bawat isa. Ngayon, ang bawat isa nito ay napakahalaga sa paggawa ng research. Pero hindi naman just for example, sa isang research, may time na hindi mo naman kailangan din gumamit ng theoretical framework. Sapat na meron kang philosophical framework or conceptual framework. At there are times naman na gumagawa ka ng research, lahat ito ay present. Lahat ng framework na ito ay present. Magkakaiba ng focus, but at the same time, when you begin to build your research, kailangan magawan mo ng paraan na magkaroon ito ng pagkakaugnayan sa bawat isa. So basically, hindi naman sila magkakahiwalay. Lahat sila ay sumusuporta sa isang goal ng research. Okay? Aside from our interest, what other factors should we consider in choosing research topic? For beginners, undergraduates, what strategy can you suggest on how we can avoid our beliefs or perspective emotion in affecting research process? So una muna, aside from personal interest, yung mga nangyayari sa ating paligid ngayon, kaya nga napaka-importante na pag-review ng literature dahil doon natin makikita kung ano pa yung kinakailangan pag-aralan. Ang sunod ay ang influence din ng mga advisors. Okay? Ang sunod ay pakikipag-collaborate din sa co-researchers sa pag-build ng topic. So basically yun. Okay? Unless siguro yung konteksto, mga problema nangyayari sa paligid. Okay? Kagaya ng pandemya. Sa pandemya pa lang, marami ka na napakadami mong pwedeng i-generate na topic tungkol dito. Okay? Yeah, that's it. At gusto mong, just for example, with the many problems that we're facing, marami kang pwedeng i-generate na anong klaseng problema ang gusto kong tingnan. At the same time, paano makakatulong ang research para ma-solve ang problema na to. So yung pangalawang tanong naman kanina is like the same, nasagot ko na rin kanina. Okay? So kinakailangan lang na maging aware tayo doon sa ating perspective. And later on, pag-uusapan natin yun. So pag pinag-usapan natin yung interpreting the data. Okay? How can we conduct with researchers in online setup? Pag-uusapan natin yan sa methods. sa methods of research. Okay? How can you tell that qualitative research is a high quality? Magkakaroon naman ng high quality ang isang research kapag maganda yung design, klaro yung design, very grounded sa it is very grounded conceptually and theoretically. Okay. So basically that, okay? So yung buong design nag-usapan natin ng una sa module 1 na ito yung iba't ibang elemento ng research design. Kapag klaro mong nabuo yung design na yon at klaro siya at very clear, very succinct yung bawat elemento at klarong-klaro ang direction, that basically is a high quality research. And basically at nata-target na ito yung pinaka-goal ng research. And another thing is that you always have to validate that first. Hindi lang ikaw mag-validate niyan, other researcher will also validate that. And also your advisor or your co-researcher will also validate the richness of the quality of your research. How would the researcher know the proper and applicable type of research to conduct? Again, hindi naman bigla na lang immediately dito bilang isang baguhan. Isang proseso na kinakailangan mo tingnan at dapat timbangin. And kapag enough information mo, basically you can design your research. Okay? At dito mo rin makikita ano mga mas applicable. So depende sa nature ng gusto mong makita. Okay? Gusto mong makita yung kultura ng karanasan ng just for example ng karanasan ng kasal o marriage sa isang kultura ng mga indigenous people. So definitely you would be using the ethnographic study para mas makita ito. Okay? How does mixed method research apply in a field method research? Pag mixed method kasi, dalawang klase yan eh. Iba-ibang metodolohiya sa qualitative research. At ang pangalawa nito ay magkahalong qualitative at quantitative. Okay? We're going to work on that as when we talk about methodologies. But on your part, I would ask you to just focus on one methodology. Huwag muna tayo mag-mix method kasi mas komplikado yun. Magsimula muna tayo sa mas simple. Is it possible for a qualitative research study to have more than one philosophical framework? Pwede, pero just focus on one philosophical framework. Just focus on one philosophical framework na mas matimbang, na mas connected at mas may may timbang doon mas may weight doon sa gusto mong pag-aralan. Okay? What does a belief of post-positivists look like? You can go back to this description. Okay, go back to the description. And basically, post-positivists is just a development from positivists. Okay, go back to the description. Okay, which type of research is more reliable, quantitative research or qualitative research? And again, it really depends on what you want to study. Okay, it really depends on your goals. It really depends on how you're going to design your research. Okay. Very often pwede natin sabihin dahil we're talking about numbers here. But again, numbers can only answer for a specific kind of data. But when you're talking about other descriptive data, numbers may not be able to describe what you want to see, what you wanted to see. What would be the possible difficulties that a researcher might encounter during a field research? And how will he be able to overcome this? And how can we communicate with people effectively? So we're going to talk about this when we talk about the data gathering procedures. Okay? Depende kasi yan kung anong klase yung studying pag-aaral, anong klaseng participants yung pag-aaralan mo, anong nature, anong lugar, okay, depende. Okay? So doon mo lang ma-anticipate kung anong klaseng difficulty makikita mo. So for example, when I did Pintakasi in an armed conflict area. So basically, in a far-flung area, bundok, dagat, so makikita mo na yung mga kinakailangan mong i-anticipate na mga difficulties. But as of this time, kinakailangan mo muna i-clarify anong gusto mong pag-aralan. Then, it is only then you'll be able to assume some difficulties that you might encounter. Okay? How do we avoid personal views and beliefs to get in the way of research? Again, I think I have answered that already. You just simply have to be aware, and we're going to discuss about that when we talk about relativity. Not relativity, is reflexivity, rather. And in the data gather, no, it's not. It's the interpretation of data interpretation. Is qualitative research better than? Is it possible to have real research output through virtual research? We're going to talk about that on data gathering. Is qualitative research better than quantitative? Again, I've answered that already. It really depends on your goals. Any tips on collecting or analyzing data when conducting qualitative? We're going to talk about that in data analysis. Is there a time limit for conducting qualitative? Of course, there's a time limit for that. And you would have to, it all depends on the kind of study you're going to conduct, the kind of setting you're going to conduct, the kind of participants you're going to conduct. Okay, and again, it depends on the design of your research. Seeing how related fundamental perspectives in approaching and gathering information are with each other. Can there be two or more different perspectives be present or true at the same time when being in a field research setting due to their relatedness? A lot of things can happen in qualitative research. In terms of perspective, you can have two perspectives. And again, it all depends on your design. It all depends on your goals. Okay. What is the best perspective? There's no such thing as best perspective. You go back to your own values. You go back to your own belief system. You go back to your own goals, your own intentions of doing research. Okay. Ang perspective mo naman, hindi naman kasi parang huhugutin mo na lang siya. Sineshape yan within your experiences, within your encounter with people, with your own personal learning. Okay. At hindi ibig sabihin na ito na yung perspective ko ngayon, after 1 year, 2 years, yung pa rin. At a certain point, baka magbago yung perspective mo. Kapag maraming karanasan, maraming encounter with people, and maraming karanasan sa pag-gather ng data. What are the ways to analyze the data gathered in qualitative? We're going to talk about that in data analysis. How to choose the best perspective in doing research. Again, I have answered that already. How do we make sure that our personal biases, okay, I have answered that already. What advice should we remember if we choose to have critical realist research? So the thing is that you have to align that with your own goals. You have to align that with your own set of values, and align that also with your research design. How do we find willing respondents of qualitative research without causing biases? What biases are prevalent in this field of research? So we're going to talk about that in data gathering procedure, or even in the ethics of research. Okay. How can we identify if the data we are presenting is not influenced by our beliefs and perspectives? So it's just a matter again of awareness. Okay, an awareness that this is happening. So we're going to talk about that when we talk about reflexivity. What is the advantage of qualitative research? Again, I have answered that already. How extensive is the time spent in field research? Is there such a thing as a minimum time? Or does it depend on the researcher? Again, it depends on all your design. That's why we're working on how to design a research so that, and part of designing is we is the time that we're going to use for doing research. Okay, how long does it take? It really depends on your design. Since we have different perspectives of truth and reality, will there be a time where it can cloud your judgment? Excuse me. Definitely. You only have to be aware about that. Okay. Is it possible to execute qualitative research without a theory behind it? Excuse me. Is it possible to execute a qualitative research without a theory behind it? Should qualitative research follow a cause and effect structure like in quantitative research, or is it possible for it to be nonlinear? Lahat ito posible. Again, it all depends on the kind of research you're going to do. Kapag yung number one mo, is it possible without theory? When you're already an experienced researcher, pwede kang magsimula doon na wala. And later on, you just support your finding with a theory. Ibig sabihin nun, sinusuportahan lang ng teorya yung nakita mo. Pero yung una, na na-mention ko na nagsimula kang kumuha ng datos na wala kang struktura na ginagamit. So ginagamit mo lang yung teorya para suportahan lang yung findings mo. Pero hindi siya yung parang hindi siya yung nangunguna para makahanap ka ng datos. Pwede rin kasi na meron ka ng struktura na hinahanap, na ginagamit, at yung struktura na yon ang nagpo-form, nagsishape sa pagtingin mo doon sa data. Pwede kasi siyang causal and effect. Depende kung ano yung goal ng study mo. Okay? So, just for example, with the Pintakasi, so nakita doon na pwedeng, for example, in the peace process, na pwedeng magamit ang Pintakasi sa pagbuo ng komunidad in terms of the peace processes. So, pwede siyang ganon. Pwedeng maging causal effect. Pwede din siya, definitely, pwede siya maging nonlinear. So, there are lots of possibilities na pwedeng mangyari when you're doing qualitative research. And my research on Pintakasi is basically nonlinear. But at the same time, it's also talking about the cause and effect aspect, the cause and effect structure also. The next one is, I would like to know if there is a bias in the scientific community regarding quantitative forms. Depende sa anong klaseng community ka pupunta. Just for example, pupunta ka sa isang indigenous community, sa mga Aita, na hindi pa nakakakita ng quantitative forms. Okay, it would even take some time for even if you translate that in their language. So kapag hindi sanay ang mga tao na gumamit ng mga form, so maraming mga aspeto na mangyayari doon sa datos mo. So again, it is very important that you clarify your goals, clarify the methods that you're going to use. So pag-uusapan natin yan when we talk about the research methods in qualitative research. Is it possible to conduct a qualitative research or research in general without any conceptual theoretical framework? Pwede. Again, pwede. But at this point, nagagawa lamang ito kapag eksperto ka na sa paggawa ng research. But as a newbie, bilang baguhan, let's start with having conceptual and theoretical frameworks. Pero pag nasanay ka na, pwede mo nang paglaruan ang mga konsepto dahil alam mo na kung saan papunta ang research mo. My first question is, what is the characteristics that we must have on conducting research in field? Pag-usapan natin yan sa data gathering procedure and even in the ethics of research. And the next question is, how can we empower the situation as students for it to have critical inquiry? Basically, how can I empower you? It's basically being able to give you the most basic in understanding research and guide you in the process. but at the same time also that you be able to develop things on your own. You decide on your own. Um, Hope to become more critical and become more creative in the process. Again, as sinabi ko sa inyo kanina, hindi nyo kinakailangan akong intayin para explain ang lahat because all the information are just right in front of you. With the advent of the information in internet, nandiyan na lahat. So it's just a matter of being able to become more confident in your exploration. Right? And again, the only role that I have here is to guide you and to assert whether you are in the right direction or you needed to modify your the way you work the way you work on your research. Okay, I think that's at the same time. So I mean, you have to define what empowerment is all about for you. Okay, and we can talk about that. Are we going to use the theoretical framework in this subject or this kind of research method? When you talk about, it really depends, okay? It really depends on the study you're going to have, okay? There are some studies that might not be needing theoretical framework, and then there are studies that might be needing theoretical framework, right? Subjective meanings do not stand on their own. Does this mean that personal biases can actually help us in research? Yes, definitely, okay? And later on, we might discover that our biases has its own veracity, has its own truthfulness. On the other hand, also, our biases may not have any bearing at all, okay? Or does not have any justification at all, okay, given the data. Yes, it can be a driving force, but at the same time, as a researcher, we are not only into subjective thing, we're also into objective exploration of reality. In fact, the whole research reflects a researcher's perspective. No, it's not only about the researcher's perspective. And we also have to remember that when you start writing your research, you have to make sure that you are echoing what you saw in the field as it is, okay? It might not be perfect, okay, but you have to make sure that what you write is actually what you saw in the field, that you can create a clear line that separates your own perspective and the perspective of the participants. Is it possible to conduct a research that conveys interrelated or conflicting fundamental perspective? Yes, why not? It's possible. But again, you need to clarify your design, you need to clarify your purpose, you need to clarify your goals. Where do researchers find inspiration to formulate relevant research questions? Your personal experiences. You can draw questions from encounter with people, experiences with people, your deep reflection about what's the reality happening around us with your professor, a discussion in the workshop or a discussion in the seminar, in the conferences, or by reading literature. So there are times that after extensive readings, you're able to come up with your own, research topics or research inspirations. How will you know the difference between big truth and small truth? But again, so what does it mean by big truth and small truth? Okay, again, going back to postmodern, how would postmodernism or even constructivism, how will they define truth? That is why, again, go back to your perspective. How does qualitative research gives more justice the lives of people that benefits the research when it comes to justifying their perspectives in life? Let's go back to that question again. Does qualitative research gives more justice to lives of people that benefit the research when it comes to justifying the... It's not only about qualitative, it's also about quantitative. So anything that we draw from the people. It is like it's not just for the sake of research. So we are a psychologist, okay, first and foremost. And the role of a psychologist is to empower the life of people and to make life a better life. Mas maging maganda ang buhay, di ba? And we are using the research to validate what we believe in. And who should benefit our research? The people. We are doing research not only for the interests, not only for our professional interests, but first and foremost, we are doing research for the interests of the people. So we want to develop the life, we want to improve the lives of people, especially in the Philippine context, wherein the majority of the people are suffering from poverty, or let's say injustices. So we are doing research, to serve these concerns. Okay. So again, this is not only about qualitative. This is also goes down to quantitative research. Can we still conduct a qualitative research without available theory? Definitely, unless you have a novel, very very new research. Okay, a very challenging research. Okay, fine. But as a new researcher, almost the theories that we need are available already. Okay, not again, unless okay, you have a very very promising research. Why not? Okay, why not? But at the end of everything, at the end of research, is that at the end of the research, no matter how novel that research is, it is also very important in terms of our professional practice as a researcher in psychology. We have to justify our own findings by linking our own findings with other theories. Okay, is it okay to have two or more philosophical frameworks as a basis in doing research, or is it possible to have no philosophical framework in research? Okay. Again, go back to your design, go back to your perspectives. And you're talking about no philosophical framework, whether you like it or not, whether you subscribe to a existing philosophical framework, you will still be using your own framework. So that is also philosophical in one way or another. Now, the question is whether your framework is personal to you. How did you come up with that framework? Okay, so that's the question. So most probably, whatever framework you have is also driven by some or influenced by some existing philosophical frameworks. How can we tell if we should engage more or engage less in the people we're studying or observing? So we're going to talk about that in the data gathering procedure, and also in the ethics of research. We are also going to talk about that. What could be the possible limitations if the research design is qualitative? It really depends on the kind of study you're going to do. So it really depends. So you will only be able to see the limitations the moment you identify your participants. You're going to identify the place where the participant will be coming from. So then you'll be able to see the limitations. So, for example, you will have a participants who are children. So if these are children, so you will see the limitations because you will be seeking the permission of parents. So that alone, you will be able to see already the limitations on how are you going to approach and meet the children. Okay. I'm wondering if what is more famous, suggested, and appropriate in doing research. And again, there's no such thing as famous. There's no such thing as the best approaches in research. It all boils down on your values, your perspective in doing research, your design, your goals, and the like. Okay. How to make sure that my unconscious bias will not affect my decision and judgment. Again, we're going to talk about that when we talk about reflexivity. Okay, you only have to be aware that you have your own biases. It is mentioned that when conducting qualitative research, the amount of time spent is high. In relation to this, how many days, months, or even years considered? Again, it all depends on how you're going to design your research. Okay, you can even do that in 1 week. You can even do that in 1 day. Just for example, a 1-day immersion in Quiapo Church, just to understand ano ba? Just to understand the movement of the activities of children around the Quiapo Church. Okay? Buong araw pwede kang mag-immerse. Okay? Just to gather the data. Buong araw lang. Okay? Is there any tip or guide? Okay? Is there any tip or guide about how to guard our own beliefs and avoid influences during research? Again, it's just a matter of awareness. And we're going to talk about that when we discuss about reflexivity. Can people believe in different approach, perspective, work on research, since that research will one day have a conclusion, and the conclusion may be interpreted differently? Marami pwedeng magbago. Okay? Ang research mo ngayon may be relevant today for the people, but because of the movement of the changes happening in the society, in the economy, in the environment, okay, maraming pwedeng magbago. At maaaring yung research mo noon, na relevant noon, ay maaaring hindi na siya ganong useful ngayon. Okay? So that's it. It really depends. The usefulness of research will only have its value depending on how people will respond to it. How people will respond to it. So, nakadepende pa rin yan sa mga tao. Okay? What are the possible problems that we may encounter with qualitative research? Lots of problems. Okay? Many problems. But you can anticipate that according to the kind of research you're going to do. Is it possible to have more than one perspective while conducting research? So I have answered that already a while ago. Can one have 2 or more philosophical frameworks? Okay, I already have answered that. How come that there are countless ways in which we can do something to help a community or a specific social problem in our country through research? Then why is it that we still have growing matters that we face, like keeping peace, poverty, especially in the way how government does things differently? Especially in the way how government does things differently than the book, or how it must be done, given that they were taught in school with their degrees before qualifying for a position, and yet they cannot continue to help in resolving social problems in our country. And that is exactly the significance of research. Okay, habang merong problema, that is an opportunity for us to understand why things are happening. When there are, just for example, very unjust structure in the society, in the human affairs, so that is an opportunity for us to understand why things are happening that way. Okay, so maraming lugar para sa mga researcher kapag nangyayari ito. Of course, lagi na naman natin inaasam na we'll be able to end for example, the situation of the poor, for example, that has been there perennially. Nandiyan na talaga siya. Pero paano tayo makakatugon sa isang problema na ganito? We also have to remember that many problems are systemic. Then research will help us a lot in understanding the system, that a system that surrounds a certain ills of the society. Okay, good. While conducting the study, the researcher is vulnerable to the topic and triggers a traumatic experience. It's possible that the research might cause. Okay, so we're going to talk about that when we discuss reflexivity. Yes, you can put it. You can put the study on hold just for you to clarify things. especially when you are not in control of your own biases, then you have to clarify your own process first. So put things on hold. At pwede mo rin i-drop, just for example, yung paggawa mo ng research ay mas makasira pa, for example, sa isang komunidad, sa isang relasyon, isang komunidad, so better na i-drop mo siya. So, bilang baguhan sa research, so mahalaga na miski klaro na sa iyo ang proseso mo sa pag-gather ng data, importante pa rin na mag-seek ka ng tulong sa advisor mo o sa coach mo sa research. How can we evade personal thoughts? So, I have answered that already. Stating all the perspective mindset in this video, is it possible that in generating a research, you have a various perspective? Will that be confusing? Again, you can use different perspectives in as long as it is aligned with your goals, with your design, with your research designs, with your purpose. Okay? Hindi siya confusing, basta klaro sa iyo kung ano yung goal mo at yung design ng research mo. If worldviews are compiled, then wouldn't it better to define universality? But again, what is universality? Who defines universality? And even when you look at the nature, ecological reality, is there such a thing as universality? Okay, again, what is universality? How do you define universality? What is the perspective? Then again, what if worldview is too entrenched on scientific or theological beliefs? Would it then be wrong to base research on? Again, going back to kind of philosophical perspective that we believe in. Okay, that is why importante when we start doing research, i-clarify natin kung ano yung perspektibo ang consciously na gagamitin natin para ma-address natin itong ganitong klaseng mga natawag dito, ganitong mga tanong. Okay? So, kailangan na i-clarify yung perspective. Is it possible for your perspective that you use in your study to change along the way? Yes, pwede siya magbago. Pwede siya magbago. Minsan, ang karanasan ay magbabago sa'yo. Lalo na, for example, yung karanasan ko sa Pintakasi, nakakita ko ng gera, nakakita ko ng patay, namatay sa gera, nakahawak ako ng patay, nakapagkarga ako ng patay. So that basically, and nakita ko yung journey ng mga tao sa paglakad nila sa bundok para lang makatakas sa gera. That basically changed my perspective. And how reliable are the results if it is based on the interpretation of the researcher? Again, hindi lang ito about the researcher. Again, when you do research, so you bring in your own perspective, your own analysis, but at the same time also, you have to draw a clear line between the perspective that you bring in that was generated by the people. Yung isinusulat mo ay naglalarawan kung ano talaga yung nangyari doon. But on the other hand, also, you also have your own take in viewing what is really happening there also. Sa iyong perspektibo. So you have to clarify it also. In my own perspective, this is this is how I see the reality that is happening. For example, in the experience of people, in the experience of Pintakasi, community Pintakasi. And last but not the least, the question is, knowing that research holds different perspective towards an event, how can we tell if the study conducted is reliable or not? How are qualitative studies replicated? Okay. Again, we're going to talk about reliability in I think the last module. Okay. But just to make it very simple, kailangan na yung research mo talaga nag-represent noong datos na kinuha mo. Okay? So later on, pag pinag-usapan natin yung data analysis, mahigita natin kung yung datos na isinusulat natin ay nagmumula talaga doon sa pinagmulan niya, yung mga tao, yung mga participants, at sa lugar na pinagmulan niya, o ito ay sarili ko ng interpretasyon. Okay? Now, the next question is, how are qualitative studies replicated? Nare-replicate ang isang study kapag, for example, masyadong very interesting ginawa mo at merong mag-replicate yan. Mahalaga yung clarity ng research design. At ang isang pinaka-importante niyan ay yung yung data gathering procedure. Isa sa napaka-importante kasi i-replicate mo nga, di ba? So kinakailangan pareho yung research design at the same time yung pag-gather ng data. Okay? So those are two important things that you have to consider in replicating. Okay? And of course, importante na merong value yung nagawang research. Kaya gusto mong i-replicate na gusto mo mapatunayan na yung napatunayan mo doon sa research mo ay pwedeng i-apply sa isang panibagong setting. Okay? Alright. So that's all, people. So beautiful questions. And if there are things that you need to clarify, then you can always raise another question. Okay, thank you so much, and be well. Continue taking care of yourself.